one side of our zipper applied from the previous section. I'm hoping that this is sufficient enough to see. So remember that when we had an invisible zipper compared to the standard zipper, whether you're doing centered or lapped or exposed, you can do top stitching for that. Invisible never gets top stitching. The whole point of it is to make it seem like there's nothing there. It's just a seam. So no top stitching on this. And the other thing is that we don't finish the remainder of our seam before putting in our zipper. That's only for the other standard zipper. So we leave our center back completely open when we are applying this. Normally, an invisible zipper is applied or stuck right into, fed into this neckline that we have, right? So we have a seam there, and it would be really easy just to hide that tape in that seam and we're done. But let's say maybe we want to add hardware, 1 or 2, maybe even 3 little hook and eyes at the top. Doesn't matter how many, but we need a little bit of space there. So if we had 1 hook and eye set up right there, we need to lower it, maybe a 1/2 inch, maybe 3/4. So that's how much I want you to lower your finishing hardware. Your stopper at the top of your zipper should finish at about a 1/2, 3/4 of an inch. And how we get this tape to go away, this top ugly part, is just to feed it and bend it towards the seam allowance. All we have to do is bend that very top area toward the seam allowance, and we can then hide it with our hand stitches. You know, it just gets fed into that seam that we make when we finish off our lining with hand stitches. So basically it's just gonna look like that. You're just gonna right into the seam. So to start your zipper, right, you get a good iron going on it. You got the coils undone a little bit, and now you're ready to set up the first side of your invisible zipper. You want to check the fit of your drape on your dress form first to make sure that you have a full inch. If you don't, that's fine. Do whatever you have. If you have a 1/2 inch, great. If you have a 1/4 inch, okay, do it. But check that first instead of going right for it at a full inch. And we're only applying it to the shell. So you can unzip it first off, and since I'm a very visual person, probably like a lot of you guys, I like to place my center backs together looking at the outer shell and then set my zipper right on top. Then you can say, okay, I'm gonna fold this side over right at my seam allowance and place it right at the center of my zipper. That's how it's gonna live once it's sewn together. And you can flip that entire setup until you are ready to stitch on it, meaning good to good. But this is just to ensure that you don't have sides flipped around. So if that helps you when you're prepping it and setting things up, then go for it. So find your seam allowance, your new seam allowance maybe, pin it in place. You can have it unzipped at this point and stitch it right on that line where the new weave starts to happen. There's like a plain weave right next to the coil, and then it goes into a twill, and stitch right on that line where it changes over. Then once you get that fully stitched in, you're gonna stop at a very specific point. Your zippers should have 1 inch, 2 inches of extra where it's past the point of your closure opening. So both sides need to stop at the exact same point on this. once you have that full seam on your first side, then you're gonna zip your zipper back up and place it on the other side. Just working with the shell, and pin it in place. If you want to be perfect about it, you can baste it in place before you machine stitch it. And once you have that position, see I can tell because the top of my tape is 1/4 inch away from my seam. Okay, I'm going to place the tape 1/4 inch away from the other side neckline. Pin it in place. Change your zipper foot out. Remember, we have to use our 2 zipper feet to get that close to the coil. You'll need both of them, one for either side of your coil. And you'll have an entire setup now. So you should have an idea of where your opening wants to stop. And I'm gonna say mine is at the top notch right here. So let me zip this or stitch this really quick and show you how to close up the rest of the seam. It's really easy to get too close to your coil, you guys. And one thing that's super important to remember, start your stitch right at the top of your hardware, the top stopper of the zipper. Don't do the full zipper tape because we need that top of your zipper tape to feed into the seam still. So let that little bit of the top be free and stitch down the rest of it. So once you get to a close point, meaning close to the end, you want to put your needle down into the machine and pull the zipper up, or get the pull of the zipper up past the needle, the machine needle. It might take a little bit of working because this is such a close construction, but it will happen. Just wiggle it around a little bit. It shouldn't be stuck like that, which means I'm probably pretty dang close. So for demo sake, I'm just gonna go around it a little bit. Okay. So now I'm coming to the point where I am right at the place where I stopped my other side. I'm going to make sure I stop exactly with the other side, meaning if you have to walk one extra stitch to get it there, fine, do that. I'm stopping exactly where I stopped on the other side. Now, we still have to close up that rest of the center back seam. And the way you do that with an invisible zipper is if you're looking at the entire inside of it, right? Try to zip it up, make sure it zips. Oh, terrible mess right there now. Take the seam allowance and sort of pinch the inside of the zipper so you can feel where it's connecting to the shell. And that is where you want to stitch, right inside of. So I can feel, I cannot get any closer to the zipper than right here. You can see your stitch. And you're gonna start stitching a little bit above that, where you did your end back tack, a little bit above and a little bit inside, like a 1/16 of an inch. And then you're gonna finish the rest of your seam. So it's very close above it and close to it. And once you get past your zipper, you can sort of gradually go back to your original seam allowance if you need to. Because this is a little bit more, you can just fade right back into your original seam allowance. So you'll need your zipper foot for this, so you can get really close to it. And you just push all of that as close as you can to the zipper. Make sure everything's out of your way, you're not stitching other layers. And I'm starting right at the top of my back tack. And right inside of it. And then you can finish it off. So ideally, you have a very smooth transition from your zipper seam and the actual opening to the real seam. It should look like nothing. And that little bump here is because I couldn't get my pull around my needle, so you shouldn't have that.